Darth Vader was clearly the most impactful foe that Luke Skywalker would ever face, but he certainly was not the most powerful. Many would agree while citing enemies such as Dark Empire Sidious or Abeloth, but there's actually one Sith Lord that Luke faced who was declared to have surpassed Vader in terms of power and threat level. The Sith in question is none other than Luke's own nephew, Jacen Solo, or perhaps for the purposes of this holocron, Darth Caedus. It feels hard to believe that any Sith besides Sidious could lay claim to being stronger than Vader, but the proof does exist, and we're here to discuss it. Welcome back, lore junkies, to the archives we've been waiting for you, and in today's video, we're going to be jetting forward in the timeline into the post-Return of the Jedi EU era, wherein we find yet another Skywalker has fallen to the dark side, and now casts a bleak shadow across the galaxy. Our aim is to examine Darth Caedus to find out exactly why he was considered more dangerous than Vader, and if that claim actually holds water. Needless to say, spoilers lay ahead for the majority of the EU novels. To begin, we need to make something clear. The notion that Caedus is stronger than Vader doesn't come from an in-universe quote exactly, but rather, it comes from a publisher summary on the back of Legacy of the Force, Invincible. It says here, "For Caedus is a scion of both the Skywalker and the Solo bloodlines whose command of the Force surpasses even that of his grandfather Darth Vader. But that claim does not strike us as erroneous, especially once we actually view the powers and feats of Caedus while doing some quick and dirty power math. Before embracing the dark side, Jacen was already a premier Jedi with a connection to the Force that hadn't been seen since Luke. All Skywalker and Solo children inherited the same potential from Anakin that Luke had, but there was just something different about Jacen, and we know it boils down to his training, his open-mindedness to all the facets of the Force, and its many different views and interpretations. At the climax of the Yuuzhan Vong War, Jacen Solo achieves a state of oneness in the Force. This is a state where his identity became fully one with the will of the Force, granting him insane temporary power while causing his body to glow with a golden light. The experience lasted only for a few brief moments, but while he was one of the only beings to actually accomplish this in the physical form, other beings like Luke Skywalker and Galen Marek have as well. While in this state, Jacen felt as if he had broken past the concepts of light and dark and understood the true nature of the Force. However, when Jacen returned to normal, he perceived that it was not possible for him to ever achieve oneness again. He was charged by the experience, however, and he went out into the galaxy to search for all kinds of perspectives on the Force from beings other than Jedi. The scars of the war in this experience leaving a heavy burden on the young Jedi. He trained with the Baran Do sages, learning their mastery of electricity with the Hassat Dur technique. This allowed Jacen to control the electromagnetic waves within his own body, enabling him to appear brain dead on monitors and even produce a different type of Force lightning. Training with the Aing-Tii monks also allowed Jacen to use the fold space technique. This enabled a form of Force teleportation of sorts, and the power of flow walking. Flow walking was the way of sending one's presence through the Force into the past or the future to observe events taking place. Beyond this, Jacen also learned how to employ extremely convincing Force illusions that were strong enough to fool even Mara Jade and Luke's son Ben. Jacen then used that moment of hesitation to end Mara's life, and upon becoming a Dark Lord of the Sith in full, the potency of all of Jacen's powers were multiplied. He was able to invade others' minds with ease, dominating even those that had strong wills, and he would even murder Boba Fett's daughter, Aaylan Vel, by crushing her mind. Caedus' arsenal of strange Force powers allowed the Dark Lord to advance his training beyond anything seen by Jedi for thousands of years. But now let us look at Vader, an absolute powerhouse of raw strength and mortal terror, able to rip ships out of the air and to tear down AT-ATs on command. And of course, he had no equal in saber combat during his era, besides maybe Yoda, Darth Sidious, or others. But Darth Caedus sets himself aside, combining his greatest power with a much larger pool of techniques. What many do not realize is that Darth Vader really didn't study the Force once he became a Dark Lord. Sidious attempted to give him texts and holocrons, but Vader rarely looked over them, and when he did, he paid attention to the wrong things. When Sidious had Vader look over the journal of Darth Malgus, he was hoping that his apprentice would glean some inspiration on how to lead as a Dark Lord. But what Vader cared about was the ships and the droids used in this ancient era, while also wanting to learn more about Malgus' secret lover. This Dark Lord was much less interested in the secrets of the dark side. Rather than learn more about the Force, Vader took what he already knew and honed it beyond perfection. This made his force chokes and telekinesis devastating, his lightsaber technique sharper than any warrior in existence, but he was limited by a narrow focus. Darth Caedus, on the other hand, embraced his full potential, and he cast a wide net into his studies. He drew powers and abilities from as many places as he could, not exactly for the purpose of gaining more power, but for gaining something more precious: understanding. A domino effect occurred where his knowledge and the esoteric aspects of the Force reinforced his prior knowledge of all of the basics, making Darth Caedus exponentially stronger and better at other techniques. The biggest reason he is seen as being more dangerous than Vader is because Caedus fulfilled the study of the Force that Darth Vader clearly neglected. Now, some might say that having access to a lot of Force abilities is well and good, but Vader's raw potency makes up for that lack of knowledge. And to this we have to look at Caedus' feats, his accomplishments in the era in which he lives. Caedus became a Dark Lord of the Sith in 40 ABY, which is around the time that Grandmaster Luke Skywalker was reaching the absolute apex of his own galaxy-quaking power. There was an occasion where Luke overpowered Caedus with the Force and even made the Dark Lord feel truly afraid. But Caedus had been caught off guard in this moment, and the two later had a duel wherein they were both extremely well prepared. When the duel occurred, they actually had each other on the ropes, and by the point of both of them becoming one-man armies, Luke having taken down dozens of soldiers personally during the Vong War, Luke was thought to be undefeatable at the lightsaber by this point. But Caedus managed to land several hits on Luke with his weapon, injuring the Grandmaster quite a bit, and giving him a real challenge. Thankfully, later we get Darth Caedus' own personal reflection on this exact duel, and although he considered it to have been a loss, he was still prideful of the fight that he put up against his uncle. Caedus acknowledged the very thing that we're acknowledging now, that he made Luke Skywalker sweat and actually put in a considerable amount of real effort. This is Grandmaster Luke, who by now had far surpassed even Prime Darth Sidious. The Prime we speak of is his clone incarnation in the Dark Empire series. Here, where all of Sidious's titanic power and the experience of his old body was injected into a younger clone who wielded the dark side with wild abandon. Luke managed to defeat that Sidious and win that day, but the event had occurred about 30 years prior to where we find Luke and Caedus now. By now, the Grandmaster has dwarfed Sidious's power, and once again it's worth mentioning that Vader was always cut to 80% of the Emperor's potential, and Caedus was challenging this version of Grandmaster Luke. For further proof, after this very fight with Luke, Caedus would face down 4 of Luke's Jedi, one of which was none other than Battlemaster Kyle Katarn. At this point, Caedus had sustained some heavy injuries, including a lightsaber blow that nearly punctured his kidney, and so despite being wounded and exhausted, he could still perceive in the Force that the 3 Jedi were no match for his skill. Caedus ragdolled them with the Force, and fended them off with ease. He only perceived Katarn as a threat, but he still handily defeated him by crashing a speeder into Kyle with the Force, and then stabbing him. It's worth noting that this was also an experienced, full-blown Battlemaster Kyle Katarn. When Kyle was younger, he had fought and defeated Inquisitor Jarek, and by this point in time that the duel had occurred, Jarek was stated to be comparable to Darth Vader in terms of raw power, although I believe this to be slightly embellished. But a final example to drive the point home, we need only look at Luke's approach to Caedus in comparison to his approach to Vader. He had felt both of their powers personally, and was able to accurately compare them. The new Sith Lord's youth, his embrace of his potential, and his expansive abilities in the Force, as well as a willingness to use any means necessary to win the day, caused Luke to believe that he was a greater threat than Darth Vader. Luke was confident that he would be able to appeal to Vader's inner light, but when it came to Jacen, Luke actually refused to engage him in a duel ever again. Even if he would be able to win, he knew that his own feelings could potentially draw him to the dark side. Caedus had killed his wife Mara, and Luke did not trust himself to fight him on a personal level, and so he had tasked Jacen's twin sister Jaina with taking care of the Sith issue. And by taking care, we mean eliminate. But here's the kicker. Luke had always known that Vader could be redeemed after everything he had done, and despite that knowledge and hope that still existed from the past, Luke did not believe that Jacen could be saved. By the late stages of Caedus' Sithhood, Luke made it clear to Jaina that her role was not to turn him or redeem him, but to destroy him. She was even given the title, the Sword of the Jedi, for this very task. This is such a diametrically opposed stance to the one that Luke would take with Vader. Even when he fell to the dark side himself, he had to be brought back by his sister Leia, and despite knowing the redemptive power of love, and how it can save one who has fallen, Luke did not believe that Caedus could be redeemed, because what Caedus was doing in his mind was the right thing. Caedus even viewed himself as a sacrificial lamb. Jacen was not tricked the way that Anakin and Luke had been. He went to the dark side with full knowledge and intention to become a villain in a twisted effort to save the galaxy from a vision that he had experienced. Jacen was ready to become the thing that he had hated for a good purpose, but that purpose became warped, made into something truly vile. But Caedus was neither sorry nor remorseful. He continued to make excuses and justifications until the boy that was Jacen Solo was no more. And although Luke was deeply conflicted, it was the decision that he ultimately came to that Caedus needed to die. One might argue that Vader's atrocities were worse, but Caedus managed to outdo his grandfather at almost every turn. Caedus became so evil and ruthless that he was beyond even redemption in the eyes of the Jedi. And that, my friends, is our reasoning to why Darth Caedus was stronger and more dangerous than Lord Vader. A lot of the time it can be difficult to admit that someone like Vader has been outdone by anyone, especially because he is typically seen as the pinnacle of the Sith. But there are a lot of wild occurrences in the EU, so if you guys are curious about the Legends versions of post-Return of the Jedi and those events, please be sure to leave a comment down below. If you give it a chance, you'll find that the EU and Legends has so much to offer. So if this video whet your appetite for more, then we will happily deliver more. But as always, my friends and lore junkies, may the Force be with you always, and I hope you're having an absolutely phenomenal day.